Before I begin this morning, we need to ask ourselves one fundamental question. What the heck am I doing up here again? I really wish I knew. When I agreed to do the message for today, I was asked if I wanted to choose the music for the service as well. And I said no, I would just do the message. You see, if I chose the music for the service, you'd be liable to end up with something like this.
Well, I woke up Sunday morning with no way to hold my head that didn't hurt. And the beer I had for breakfast wasn't bad, so I had one more for dessert.
So I think we're best to leave it to others to choose the music for Sunday morning. You've all heard the quote, "To whom much is given, much is expected." I often push that, but I don't really feel like I need to push it here, because collectively, you're already doing much. To me, that's a faith that's alive, as it should be. You might not have noticed, but this is not a young group, and considering that fact, you should all be spraining your arms, reaching around to pat yourselves on the back. You're doing much here. I'm so not qualified to preach at you and tell you to do more. Active church communities like this one just remind me of the Bible quote, "Well done, good and faithful servant." After I agreed to do this message, I wasn't really sure what exactly I was going to talk about. Lots of things came to mind, but I like to think that the best things in life are not things, they're moments. So I thought I'd share a few moments from our travels over the last couple of years, and maybe we'll find a lesson or two buried in there. The first moment was a little bit of magic in the Philippines last year. In our free time, 3 of us from the Habitat team walked to the local village and just wandered around the community, soaking it in and saying hi to the locals. As we were walking down one street, I could hear the sound of a welding machine nearby. And so I peeked over this high fence, and there was a man in the yard fabricating those 3-wheeled motorcycles that you see so many of over there. Now, for those who know my dad, you'd know just how fascinated he was going to be to see those being made. So I was trying to get a photo over the fence. And then we heard this little voice asking if we wanted to come in. Obviously we said yes. So this young woman opened the gate, and in we went. And she and her mom brought out chairs for us and offered us a drink. The young lady was home from college where she was studying tourism, and she wanted to interact with some real actual tourists, and of course there we were. Her dad was the one fabricating the tricycles. They had a shop where they did that, but it was destroyed like so much else during Typhoon Haiyan. So now they were building in their yard because they couldn't afford to rebuild the shop. But the main thing is they were still building. It must have been a devastating blow to the family to have their shop destroyed, but they were carrying on as best they could, together. I don't envy their situation, but I do admire their resolve and their response to the situation. The second moment I wanted to talk about was this year. I'm jumping around a little bit here. After our build in India was done, Bruce and I played tourist in Kathmandu for a couple of days before we headed home. And one of the things we did while we were there was an Everest flight. You fly along the edge of the Himalayas from the ancient city of Kathmandu and turn around near Mount Everest. My pictures are taken out of the airplane window, so they certainly don't do it justice. At a couple of points along the way, they let everybody go up one at a time into the cockpit to look out the cockpit window to get the best possible view. The pilot does this every day, so while I was up there, I asked him if it ever got any less cool, and he just grinned at me and said, "Not yet." But my point is this: yeah, we got to see Mount Everest. Yeah, it's the highest mountain in the world, and yeah, it's very cool to see it. But Everest was by no means the best part of that day. To get to it, we flew by some of the most magnificent, brutal, beautiful terrain I've ever seen in my life. And I got to do it with a good friend beside me, sipping champagne in the plane afterward. I think we put too much emphasis on biggest and maybe lose sight of some other simpler but even better things. The third moment I'm going to talk about was while we were building in India this year. You need to remember that we were building in a country that's 78% Hindu, 15% Muslim, 2.5% Christian, and the rest Sikh, Buddhist, and Jain. So I was badly outnumbered. And to be honest, I never really thought much about it for the first few days. The father in the family my team was building for was a Muslim, but there was no reason to think about our differences. We were there because of our sameness. And it was very cool every day to hear the call to prayer broadcast out on loudspeakers from the mosque, echoing out over the rooftops. But then on March 22nd, while we were in India, we heard about the Brussels terrorist attacks. 32 innocent lives lost because of somebody's twisted sense of religious rightness. We did a lot of thinking about it and some talking about it, and I have to admit it hits home more when you're surrounded by 190 million Muslims. But at the end of the day, it really meant little to us. Those attacks were not about faith. They were about hate, and they were about fear, and they were about fanaticism. If we had let it change how we felt about the people that we were living amongst, that would have meant that the perpetrators had won. And they must not win. They must not win. Every moment that one of us can spend in service to our fellow man is a moment when hate is not winning. That, my friends, in itself is enough of a reason to keep doing these things, no matter what the cost. The fourth moment I'll talk about is back in Kathmandu. It's a very spiritual place. You can feel it while you're there. It seems like there's a temple of some kind on every street corner. Maybe that's why the earthquake was so devastating. There were so many temples damaged and destroyed because there are so many there. But in Nepal, as Christians, we were even more outnumbered. Nepal is only 0.45% Christian. And of course, we're visibly different than the people that live there. Yet I never felt anything less than complete acceptance. I was pretty clearly an outsider, but I never felt unsafe. I never really even felt particularly noticed. In the tourist zone, of course, they all pounced on us. They could tell we were outsiders. But outside of that, I was just another person, not an outsider. I'm not really sure there's a specific lesson in that. It just seems worth noting how tolerant and accepting they are of outsiders. I would really like to hope that we are just as accepting of strangers. During one day off during our build in India, one of the places we visited was the Gandhi Memorial. It's built on the property where Gandhi lived for many years and where he died. In fact, the spot where he was killed is marked, and we stood at that spot. The whole place is filled with displays from that remarkable life. It is an intensely emotional place. I really don't think it's possible to be there and remain unmoved. But while we were there, I had a moment of, I won't say anger, but profound sadness, because it occurred to me that some fundamentalist Christians, including some people that I know, would tell you that Gandhi, because he's a Hindu, not a Christian, is now and eternally in hell. I suppose it must be nice to be so sure of your own rightness and so sure that you understand everything. But for me, I prefer to think maybe we don't understand everything. Maybe there are things beyond our feeble comprehension. And maybe, just maybe, it's not dogma. Maybe it's love that wins. I mentioned in my last message here that the Sikhs serve 30,000 meals a day to the homeless in Delhi. As I mentioned then, I knew nothing about Sikhs before I headed to India, other than recognizing their distinct garb. But while we were touring Old Delhi, we took a moment at a shrine to a group of Sikh martyrs who had died while protecting the right to religious freedom of a group of Hindu scholars. Our tour guide referred to Sikhs as the militant arm of Hinduism, but strictly speaking, that's not correct. I found out that they are monotheistic, like us, and they live by core values that I really admire. There is one God, equal rights for women, equality of all mankind, focus on God, work hard in life, share with others, help others, protect the rights of others, be ever ready to sacrifice for others, fear only God, care for all humanity, live to the highest spiritual level, and act with humility. Are those not great values to live by? It pleases me that our Canadian Defence Minister is a Sikh. To me, that seems like an absolutely perfect choice. I'm not trying to win converts to Sikhism. I'm not going to convert myself, but this is an example of the kind of thing that you learn about other people only by stepping out among them and with an open mind and an open heart. The last moment I wanted to talk about was something very simple, but very cool that happened every day while we were on the build site in India. Late afternoon, the homeowner we were building for would bring out these tiny cups of hot chai tea for us all. It was a moment of ceremony every day that was unexpected and unbelievably special. I don't even like tea normally, but we all look forward to that treat every afternoon. It was a small gift and a simple act of sharing, but oddly, it was one of my better memories from the trip. I'm determined to remember that lesson, that sometimes it's such a small and simple thing that can have such an impact. In the months since we came back, some of the memories of the trip have started to fade, but I can still taste that tea, and I still remember very clearly how it felt every day to share that moment. When I was preparing this message, I emailed all my teammates to see if anybody had a picture of our tea time that I could put up on screen, and nobody did. I think at the time we were all just too caught up in the moment to think about snapping a picture. I'm going to close with the traditional Hindu salutation, Namaste. But before I do, I want everyone to take a moment and actually think about it. Most people have some idea what it means, but for those who don't, it translates to something like this. That which is sacred in me acknowledges that which is sacred in you. It recognizes the divine spark in each of us. Is that not a wonderful way to look at each other? Would that not solve a lot of the world's challenges? I left a church that was being destroyed from within by a 34-year grudge within the congregation. Wouldn't it have been better if we were able to acknowledge the sacred in each other rather than focusing on the old hurts and drawing battle lines? You don't have to be a Hindu to recognize the value of the fact that each of us carries something sacred, something of God within us. And take a moment and think about that. It really is, at its core, the root of all charity and compassion. So, from the bottom of my heart, Namaste.